Welcome to the July 1st Jail and Zones production user call. We have Jan, Jamie, Dave, and myself, Michael, so far. And a reminder, the BSD-CAN full day playlists are up. The individual talks should be up pretty soon, but there was a lot of good material there. And EuroBSDCon is rapidly taking shape insofar as speakers and presenters, two of whom are present, are receiving their updates. Wait, maybe three. And they've added a day, so there will be, of all these wonderful things, a EuroBeehiveCon. I suspect others will be traveling about the beautiful city of Zagreb, but watch that space for pretty much daily updates on final schedule, etc., etc. So EuroBeehiveCon has always, like any BeehiveCon, welcomed container talks. So I've only really had the 48 hours to think about this. So I welcome all of you to start thinking of like what form that can take. Should it follow maybe the OpenZFS Summit format where we do some presentations and hackathon and you name it, but it's a one-day event, so we'll figure that out. Briefly, jail descriptor news, it sounds like that might just get some love. Godspeed. Thank you. Anything to add? Okay. Looking forward to that. So some escape news. It looks like some very talented people have jumped in on some PRs that Jan brought up. There they are. They do not yet show close, I guess, because they haven't received security advisory patches that can be added to a classic FreeBSD system. And there is lots going on in package base, and it might even rear its head in the next few minutes with Dave's demo. And it sounds like, Jan, your talk is about that and jails. And Lucas's talk was accepted about package base. So there's lots going on. But Dave, you might have a demo. Go ahead and share your screen as appropriate.
Let's see if we're ready right now. Okay, so share the screen thing. So this is all starting to come together. So for the Podman things, Podman in general, I had three things I wanted to do, aside from just spin up a toy container and go look at my toy container. I needed to be able to mount an arbitrary ZFS file system in it. So this is for persistent storage for a database, something important, where you want the host system to go. I know where this data set is. I'm going to manage snapshots. I'm going to back them up off site. And when I run my container, I want to drop it in and have it mounted before application starts. That's one piece. The second piece is to run an arbitrary bit of networking. And the crux of the matter is that the Podman stuff that Doug's done today, which is awesome, requires a bridge, which most of the time is fine, and it uses a VNet jail. But sometimes we want to use some very specific networking thing that we already have. So if you're doing something greenfield, then it's not a limitation. But if you've got some existing stuff, like in my case, I've got a 3-node cluster and all of these other jails that expect that 3-node cluster to be accessible over a specific network. And so what I need is a way of taking a piece of this existing network and dropping it into a container. And with a lot of help from Jan yesterday and chats over the last week or so, I think we got that to work. And the third bit is something which I haven't tried, but another guy, Brendan from South Africa, already has working, which is awesome. And that's kind of like the trifecta. Use ZFS data sets in my container, use arbitrary networking in my container, and the third bit is set up a stack of stuff. So let's see where we get to here. Did I actually get to share stuff? I did.
Please.
And probably the font is too small.
Put on another tab. Thank you, Zoom. Yeah. Can you be more specific on stack, or that will be unfolding in the next few minutes?
Yes, stack in a second. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's
stack of stuff.
Have a look. Two things we're going to look at. The first one is our container file. So this is very the same as like Docker stuff. And what we want to do is build our own base system, the FreeBSD runtime package that we build in release engineering is the bare minimum required so that you can run package itself. But we actually want to reuse this, our own one with more pieces in it. And so we're going to pick FreeBSD ZFS because it's the piece we need. We could add other things if we liked, and that means we'll have FreeBSD, base, utilities, the runtime, and the ZFS package. The second thing we want to have a look at is when this container starts, there are things called hooks. So let's jump down here and have a look at hooks. I wrote a blog post that has more detail about hooks, but for those of us familiar with jails, you'll know that as the jail itself starts up, there is a phase where we run before the jail is created, after the jail is created but still on the host, after the jail is created but before your RC scripts run but inside the jail, and the same sort of things in reverse again as well. So you sort of go into the jail construct and then slowly back out in each of those levels. And Podman has the same structure and allows us to do stuff. But Podman is very, very different. So what I've got here is, you can see there is, there's a file that should be named differently. I'm not quite sure why that is done that way. We might have to rename this file. It's very likely I've been playing with this. Cool, so let's have a look at this. So we've got a JSON file which describes the functionality we want, and then we have a shell script which is just like any other shell script. So let's have a look at the ZFS one, which is more complicated. Oh yeah, CFS, that's what I need to fix. CFS.sh. There we go. So first we're going to look at the hook. A little bit of metadata that describes the runtime version that it was written for. The hook is pretty obvious. This is the shell script that's going to run. This one is going to run all the time and only in pre-start. So this box is not the one where I was doing my testing on. That's annoying. Let me just go and re-grab this from the blog post that I wrote for my own memories here. That is awfully annoying, isn't it? Cool, there we go. So the hook, that's what we want here. I wonder which computer I did this on then.
First world problem.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, too many computers. I probably ran it on something where the networking worked. So let's have a look here. We've got our hooks path, and it runs at our 2 stages here when the runtime is created. So this is the jail exists, but we're still running on the host, and there are no processes in the jail yet. Ideal time to mount file systems and do hijinks with networking, and again, post-stop on the way out. We can pass things called annotations into the Podman command, and that's just metadata. And you can see here, this is a pretty straightforward sort of pattern match. And so this hook is only going to run in these 2 stages, and only if this annotation is present here. And we'll see what that looks like on the command line in a second. And we use this for a couple of things. Our shell script becomes simpler because we have to have the this value is guaranteed to be set. It might be empty, but at least we'll have a value for it. So let's go back to the hook, and I might just update this to match what I've got here. Good. Let's just put this in here as well. And we'll delete. There we go. So pretty straightforward script. The input is a JSON blob provided by Podman, and we just want to grab it. And for the sake of debugging, I just stick in the file. We don't need this in production, but it's super handy to see what goes in and out. And in the JSON blob, we need to have the ID of the container, which is our jail name. We want to know the status, and that's because this script can be called as the jail is created and as the jail is exited. So at the moment, we're only handling the first stage, the jail being created, and we make sure the data set exists, because if it doesn't, there's nothing we can do. And finally, if the status is created, we're on the way in. We're going to do the pretty normal stuff you'd expect to see. We're just modifying the existing jail and making it sure it has all of these parameters that we need. I found that There's probably a way to set these in Podman, but it was easy just to put them in the script with the normal jail tools. Same thing here, we jail the data set, and then finally inside the jail, we need to mount the data set. And so that is why back in our container file here, we have to install the FreeBSD ZFS tool because it runs in the jail. It might be possible to do that separately. I don't know. To do it from outside the jail, I didn't try. This was good enough. So that's our hook, and we can see we've got a few other ones for networks later. So first of all, let us build our container file, and I'm just going to grab this window. I made a little command called Podman nuke, which just destroys all the containers at all my registry to prove that I'm not using a pre-prepared one. And let's just make this here. So let's do this. I need to go to OCI. Cool. Here's my container file, and I should just be able to do that. We need to do that. So this stuff should start to become more and more familiar over time. We pass them some environment variables. We tell it what architecture we're using in this case, what OS version it's going to be, 14.3. The no-host file I'll explain once it gets started, but basically Podman tries to make life as easy for you as possible, and it mounts a file from the host into the jail, into the container. And when we upgrade package base, this file gets in the way and breaks. So we want to leave it out. It's only useful when you have a network of, let's say, multiple containers and you want them all to talk to each other. This is just the etc host file, and Podman makes sure that it's populated with the names of the other containers for you. And then finally, we're going to tag it at the end. We're not going to call this base. We're going to call this FreeBSD ZFS. And that just tells it to use this container file here. So off it goes. Let's full screen it. Now, what's interesting here is see the step 1, step 2, step 3. What have I done wrong here? I've left out a really important piece, haven't I? Yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the one from my example. Like I wrote a blog post.
The PKG path is too short. PKG
Yeah, the reason is I mount it from the parent. So let's just fix this up because my computer is a fish one. Do the same thing again. So all I've done here is said, hey, use package from the host and drop it in to bin/package in the container. So this is super nice. If you've got any utilities like /rescue you want to use inside the container, you can just mount them in, and it just does the right thing. Let's try that again. That looks a bit better. So we're using package from outside to run stuff on the inside. And give it a couple of moments, it'll finish. What's interesting is each of these steps here is actually a separate layer, a separate jail invocation, and Podman will record each of these steps, and it will be able to reuse that should we run it again. So let's have a look now. Okay, and here we can see here's our localhost FreeBSD ZFS, this tag here that's been used, and the image it's run off. So we only need to do this once, and we can keep reusing it and reusing it and reusing it for every other image. So we've got that. Now let us make ourselves a ZFS thing. Notation. Here we go. I don't want the network one. Ooh, so many. I'm going to have to copy and paste this again. Oops. Okay, here. We've done our hooks, and we want to run our container here. I need to make sure we actually have the ZFS data set. We do, but they might actually be connected to an existing jail. I think they are. So I shouldn't have done this on my computer, should I? I should use a demo one. Let's just stop all of them here. It's going to take a little while to shut down. While that's doing, we can look at the annotations. And I don't have any of these here yet. Come on, CI, you're taking a while to shut down. One. Oh no, I think I can use a different one. Yeah, we can. I think we can cheat and use different. Do the other ones here. So let's make some data sets. Oh, jailed. That's why. Cool. All right, that should have cleaned stuff up. So let's make a new one. And we're going to create also a child jail. Sorry, a child data set as well. So this is important for many databases. You only want to back up the data, and you're not interested in backing up the materialized views because they take up a lot of space. And if you really do have downtime, you can probably restore the database, let the views rebuild, and then catch up with fixing everything else you need to do. So it's a bit of a trade-off. We want a child. Did I not just create that? There we go. And let's just have a look here. I think I should have called that CouchDB3. So there we go. That's what we want here. These can be mounted. They're jailed and they're not actually mounted at the moment. So we need that ready to be jumped into our jail. And with a bit of luck, we can now run our Podman container. So what we want is to run the container. We want to see the log files going into this directory here. And we want to see what's happening here. So let's do this here. That's going to be a do as. And we need to fix the name here. And that was a dot. There we go. So what should happen here, if we got all of this right, this container that we already built is going to run the hook. It's going to pass in this ZFS dot data set and the parameter here. And we're going to run it on the way in and on the way out for the container. And it should run this script here and print out some log file stuff in there. So let's see if this works. Okay, a lot of stuff there. The thing about this is, right, you compare this to setting up your jail stuff with Ansible or Chef or Puppet. This is really, really, really quick.
Good point.
It's really quick. And that's kind of the main thing. And yay, our view, our thing worked. We have this mounted into a container. And no one will believe us. This is actually a container. We have to show it here. There we go. Here is our jail here, pretending to be a Podman container for us. And we could do stuff in here if we wanted to. What are we going to do? Foo. And we're done. So now the jail is gone. Disappeared. And let's make another one. So this will be the same database locations, but the jail will be a different one. It comes back. What have we done wrong here? I know what the problem is. We don't have our shutdown script. So this jail is still attached. This data set is still attached to the previous jail. So we're going to go mount, grep, couch. And we're going to have to get rid of these manually the old-fashioned way. What have we got here? Actually, the easiest way to get rid of is this. Get rid of that one too. Okay. I think we're good now, aren't we? So let's add the reverse step to unmount the thing at the end. first up, we should have a log file here. That's great. So let's have a look at that. This is the metadata it gets passed in every time. So let's just go jq dot, so like that. And we've got two things here. One on the only on the way in. We've got it on the way in twice. And you can see the annotations that we provide on the command line are available in here. As zfs.dataset, the ID, the container ID is there. That's the jail ID, and it matches this somewhat long path here. Okay, so our script has access to the jail, the metadata that we passed in the annotations, and also the physical path where the jail is created. And from that, you can do anything, just like we would normally. And here again, here's the second one running it again here. So having destroyed my data sets, I'm now going to have to go back and make them again. That's one. Surely it should be in the history. I think that's what I wrote. It doesn't really matter too much what I wrote. So now we need to add the bit that exits. And what I think is really cool about hooks is a lot of the plumbing we would normally do is just done for us. So we're just doing the same thing here. If the status is stopped, then we're going to loop over all the data sets that are recursively under this data set and unmount them. So just to explain that in a different way, we've chosen to create two data sets. On the way in, we mount one, and the child data set is automatically mounted two for us, okay? And on the way out, we have to undo both of those because mount and ZFS work a little bit differently, and we have to do them manually that way. So another jail I've got is a much more complicated setup. It's a logging tool called Graylog, and it comes with an OpenSearch database, which has its own views and database directories, MongoDB for storing its config, and the Graylog application itself as well. And we store all three of these in child data sets of 0/var in the jail. And so we have VarDB Graylog, VarDB MongoDB, VarDB OpenSearch, and VarDB OpenSearch some other stuff for its views. And we keep all of these things separately, and they're all just automatically mounted. So this is really important to be able to mount and unmount these things automatically. So with a bit of luck, if I haven't forgotten anything, here's our annotations. We should just be able to start our jail, mount. It's there. Okay, very good. Boot, exit. Okay. Somewhere down here, we should have a hook. I can't see it running the hook. But let's check. Open up our, whoops, wrong window. This one here. Okay, created. We've done something wrong because it's supposed to have done it on the way up. What did we forget? Something simple like saving the file. That was it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's try this again. Okay, create them. Run our Podman. Third time lucky, otherwise we'll give up. Okay, and now I'm just going to go Jason, do that one. Okay. Okay. It didn't create the hook again. We missed something else. I'm going to call it a day and assume that worked. Yeah, I've forgotten something that I haven't cut and pasted correctly. Doesn't matter for the moment. So that's one part of it. The next part we're going to have a look at is hooks again, but this time we're going to do network stuff. So same thing, we specify a hook in JSON. There's a path. We specify some annotations that we want to use. This is a way of moving a config from the command line into the container script, and we're going to run it the same two places on the way in and on the way out. And think about debug. The script looks awfully familiar. Same little shuffling again. Get stuff on standard in, grab our ID, status, and interface. And then here on this one here, because I'm lazy, I haven't written out the precise way to extract this IP address for this device from the command line. I'm just hard coding it for the sake of convenient demo. So what we have here, let's just have a look here. We're going to change this annotation to, what do we have? Net.interface equals Nebula 0. So Nebula is just a mesh networking thing that happen to be in ports that are not used. There's nothing special about it. It's just the first one I grabbed that I didn't have in production already and wanted to learn some stuff about. So if we go Nebula 0, we shouldn't have one. Nebula, we'll start it here so we can see what it's doing. It's the right window, get it run. And we can see a bit of stuff here. It's doing some firewall-y things. It's clearly a Go program. That is the IP address we have. It immediately contacts like they call it a lighthouse, but it's like a clearinghouse. It's a central server that's up most of the time. And it uses that to do things like work out what is my outgoing IP address, am I going through a NAT for IPv4, all that sort of stuff. So if we've done this right, we can ping one. There we go. We're pinging some server over the VPN. And if we'd been paying attention, we would have seen it do something here to figure out what host it was contacting. So we're not here for that bit. We're here to see it move into a jail. So what we're expecting to see here happen is this ifconfig here is going to start off with an IP address, and it's going to be present on the host, and it's going to disappear into the jail, and then we can use it from there. So let's run this. Assuming I got the hook right, we should be good to go. Okay, so we're now in the jail. And here we go. Here we have our container with the IP address. So what does it look like from outside? The interface has disappeared, but if we've done this right, we should be able to ping 192.168.100.102, and that works. I guess it took Jan Helen take us a couple of hours of bashing our heads against various forms of stupid to get this to work. But it's really not that complicated after that. You can see the 3 steps we need to do was move the interface inside the VNet jail, and then from outside with the -J flag to the jail, set the IP address on the interface and tell it it's up. I'm going to ask Jan to explain that because there's a reason behind it and I didn't quite follow yesterday. But we do the same thing with creating the route. So I'm going to exit here and then I'll hand it over to Jan to tell you why this works. So we do that. You notice here we don't have any...
the editor open?
Yep, and I'll stop there. But you can see the tunnel address is back on the host.
Yep. So the Nebula VPN is a user space VPN and it uses a TAN interface. The VPN daemon runs on the host, not inside the container. And this, together with FreeBSD VNet jails, can be used to have the daemon running on the host, create the VPN interface, and then move that interface in this hook into the container. What happens when you move an interface from the host into the VNet enabled jail, which is how the container is implemented, is that it loses its IP addresses and there won't be any routes either inside the container. So in line 10, the interface gets moved into the right VNet. In line 11, the IP address gets added back to the interface, but it's a bit confusing because this is a TON interface. So it's not like your normal Ethernet interface. It is a point-to-point interface. And on point-to-point interfaces, you have to specify not just your own address, but the address of the other end of this one-to-one interface. Because this is a VPN, which is more like a software-defined networking solution, you have the same IP address locally and on the interface, but it's not a problem because you can still use it like that. And then you have to add the network route for the directly connected network so that it kind of feels more like your more familiar point to multi-point or broadcast capable interfaces. Yeah, that's the 3 lines, 10 to 12.
Yeah, thanks. That was awesome. So the reason for doing this in general is that we have at least for me, the purpose of running a container is not flexibility. It's because I don't trust the stuff in it. And I'm assuming by default that the container will be compromised at some point and anything that's secret in there will be stolen. So by configuring the network externally and dropping this into the container, into the jail, it has access only to the VPN. There is a way to start this container without creating the net link. Sorry, not the link. Without creating the bridge interface, and that way the only network this jail will have is the one we provide it, and it doesn't have access to the encryption keys. It just has the IP address. It's a very, very secure way of doing this, at least with Podman. So the last bit I'm not going to run because I haven't tried it locally yet. Is point 3, the stack of stuff. So if you can imagine here, there is a tool called, let's give ourselves a browser. Go back to here, drop that in, Podman Compose. So those people have used Docker extensively, which is not me. There's a tool called Docker Compose, which you effectively provide it 3 or 4, let's say, containers, and you say, please make all of these. And it's a great way to bring a developer environment to people. You can have them run it locally, and it will set up your classic web stack if you want. You have a database layer, maybe some sort of cache, Nginx for routing URL routes, and then whatever your application is behind that. And Braden has made huge progress, and it's gone right down the Podman Compose suite here. So let's go and have a look and just have a look at what Braden did here. So I already put the link into our production call stuff, but
That's you? Okay, cool.
yeah, here we have Podman Compose, and we're just going to grab a few pieces out of it. It describes the services that are going to be running, tags for where the images come from. So this is like our FreeBSD-CFS 14.3, for example. It requires another container as well. I think that means it started first. A bunch of ports that it needs open, so quite a lot here. Some monitoring stuff. This is for Grafana, Loki, and Prometheus, all that type of stuff. Logging to files, okay. And where is another one here that we want to look at? Yep, so the same thing here for Loki. Loki stores logs, and he's got some places where he wants the files to be stored at so that they're also located externally. He's not using my ZFS trick because it wasn't available then. So you have to manage that with normal files here. And I think I scrolled too far. There's a Prometheus container as well. So far we've got Alloy, Grafana, Loki, Prometheus, and the alert manager thing to send you alerts as well. So this is quite a complicated piece of ops structure, all wrapped up into one deployable blob on an IPv6 private network here. And that is really, really neat. And I think this is going to be a great way to provide people who are working on FreeBSD developers self-contained and yet pretty clean setup that will be the same as everyone else is using. And the nice thing is, if you want to use this in production, that so long as you're using the same tag, you'll get the same container, and there's like these 4 or 5 other little bits, the IP addresses of stuff that you need to implement, and you're done. Really, really nice solution. So closing it all back, we can specify the IP addresses we want for these containers, and that means we can use an overlay network, whether it's Nebula here or maybe VXLAN or something else, have a bunch of large servers, very large servers, where you start the container arbitrarily on any one of these nodes, and it will just automatically be able to find through the network the other nodes it needs to talk to, and it doesn't really care about where they're running, so that if you have a problem on one node, you shut down the containers, restart them somewhere else. The sort of layer 2 Ethernet will realize that the overlay network at least will realize that the IP address has moved to a different node. It'll start the container, and the traffic will flow there, and the applications will see a brief outage during that. Super neat. Anyway, that's enough demo for today. Now that's kind of my goal. Has really been all this last 6 months is get all of this working all together, the networking, the file system, and finally Podman Compose to put it all together. Questions welcomed.
So
hooks,
go ahead, Jan. I just have
if I understand this correctly, in Podman you can express preconditions for hooks as regex matches against configured annotations.
Yep.
If it matches, the hooks runs, and otherwise the hook is just disabled.
Yeah, let me pick one. We want both of these, don't we? Want that one and that one. Yeah, so it just doesn't run. If you can match on other things, not just annotations, but that's the gist of it. If this isn't provided, then this hook doesn't run. Mm-hmm. And the same thing for ZPS one here. I've just picked a different annotation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's quite nice to have. And one recommendation I would make is to, as part of your, before even the jail is created, with the equivalent of the exec.prepare hook, to tear down anything which would get in the way of the container starting. So, for example, unmount stale file systems, unjail data sets, and so on. Yeah.
On whichever system I actually used for testing this originally, that turned out to be really, really reliable. I think the main thing we would need is, right now you can't tell easily if sorry, how do I phrase this? You can't tell which jail owns a data set once it's jailed. There's no way of reading that information. And so I asked Igor Ostapinko if he can have a look at that and figure out how to do it, because it's one of the pieces we need for this.
But why can't you just unjail the data set and jail it again?
Well, you don't know if it's in use. So you don't want to yank it out from someone else's system, another container, if it's still in use.
Okay.
Yeah, it probably depends.
Can't you check the mount point?
You can check if it's mounted.
Not in the property, but through looking at the output of mount-p.
You can see if it's mounted, but you can't tell if it still belongs to another jail. So they're not the same thing. You can see that it's jailed, but you don't know what jail has it, and you don't know if that jail is still active.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm sure Igor will find a fix for this, and then we're good. Because if you go, Let's start all the jails. With finding a bit of message. So if we go to this list, like this, we will see here that these are jails.
Do you have a jail data set you can look at the host and do a ZFS get all?
Yeah, you don't see it. We already know this. And you can see here, there's no, the jail, it just says jail is on, but you don't know from whom.
Yeah. Damn it. And you can't get it out of JLS or something?
No. But Igor, I think, already has a patch. I just haven't had time to try it. So I think we'll have this sorted in time for 15.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So when you mentioned overlay networking, I very much remember your immutable FreeBSD talk from EuroBSDCon. Is this sort of your natural progression, having spent a year plus working on it?
Pretty much,
the next generation of that?
Yeah. So that was a big thing I think. What do I think is really nice about the Podman stuff? There's one thing which is sort of obvious, really fast start times. And if you're deploying containers to different systems, it's not run Ansible or Chef and then wait 5 minutes and do stuff. It's really right now. And you can locate your container caches. You can use a public one or you can use a private one and locate it right by your servers. And the second piece is the sort of composable stuff where we don't really have a nice solution like this for jails today. And that doesn't really matter for production, but it matters a lot for developers. And this type of ease of setup is one of the things you need for developers to get going. I remember the first time I had set up developer environments for FreeBSD for not for systems, for application developers, the amount of time wasted by finding every single possible variation that people could do, and just something as simple as setting up a FreeBSD VM on their MacBook or their Linux box or whatever else, or their Windows box, was really staggering. And this removes an enormous amount of the pain, a lot of it.
How could you spell out your own definition of composable?
Yeah, so composable is a word from functional programming where you can pass the output of one function to the input of the next one. And a good example of this is if you're multiplying a whole bunch of stuff together, it doesn't matter what order you multiply and divide. They are, we can call them composable, but I think the correct word is commutative. And if you're doing addition and subtraction, the same thing, the order in which you add and subtract stuff doesn't matter. But it does matter if you're mixing addition and subtraction and multiplication. So for composable, for me, it means I can take the classic stack, an Nginx, so a proxy, a database, and some sort of middleware application. And I can, just like Brendan has done here in this container, I'll try and get my scrolling just right. You see there's 3 services, Alloy, Loki. Actually, there's more than 3, aren't there? Prometheus and Grafana. And each one of these has this little pile of stuff here that says, okay, what's the name of it? What ports are exposed? What host names do I want to use? What data volumes am I using? And you can stack them all together and give a person a one thing to run it and see what happens.
All in one jail, or that would make a separate jail for Prometheus, or separate?
They'll all be separate jails. So each one of these things is its own jail, running its own thing, and the networking is sort of to a point predefined here. You won't recognize these yet, but I do. These are all Podman IP addresses. And so for this stack, you will know that Podman always has this network available, and it hooks them all together. And when I think of composable, the word, it's about trying to bundle things up into like a higher level concept. And most of the stuff we deal with, the chefs, the puppets, and so all stuff like that, are not quite that granular. sorry, not quite that abstracted away. You can build all of that stuff, but you build it yourself, and it will be custom for your environment. But with this setup here that Bretton's done, you could hand that to anybody, and they'll make a couple of changes to the IPv4 and IPv6 addresses externally, and then they can just reuse that in any environment. With a lot of firewalling, a lot of filing would be needed.
So if that sounds very shareable with others, what's the sort of Venn diagram overlap with this mythical app store we all kind of hint at, imagine? Is Podman itself the app store and you just choose one of these profiles, or is there something in addition to it?
I don't know. Early days for me for using this stuff. Yeah.
Podman would be the tool you use to run the stuff, but it is not the App Store. It's kind of like the client application for the App Store.
Okay.
So if you look at his container files, if you can bring one up.
Which bit do you want to look at here? How to go further
you
up?
can see it here that you just depend on basically in this registry there's a container, and then you can select the tag or whatever as a dependency expressed as a URL. Can you bring up open the container file?
This one here, like this is just one of them.
So here you can see that you, just like Docker, because Podman is effectively a Docker rewrite with some extra features and a lot less ugly history. You will then, for example, here say from docker.io/freebsd runtime with the tag 14.3. And then you specify stuff you want to do, like run mkdir to make sure you have that directory. Then add a file from the current working directory, from the directory containing the Docker file. Sorry, the container file. And you run a bunch of commands. And if I remember correctly, from the documentation, it does some fancy stuff to cache the result after every command it runs, so that if something fails midway through, you can quickly retry.
Yeah, this is what's not really obvious here is what I would have done in Bretton's case is put all of this here into a single source container that like my FreeBSD ZFS one and tagged it. And then locally I have all of that and they could all boot off that. And then when you need to make a new release because, I don't know, there's a patch come up for curl or OpenSSL needs to be upgraded, whatever, you can recreate the base image and then they'll recreate all of that afterwards. And you can see here that there's not a lot in here, extra stuff. He's done an amazing job of this, by the way. So the simplicity does not come at a cost here. And at the end, you specify the script that will be used to run it. Now, we're used to in FreeBSD of running everything with an RC script. And in the container world, you don't do that. You provide your own. On my list of stuff to do over summer is to do an example of where you take two different applications. One of them is DNS dist because I've already done it. It's a load balancer for DNS services. And it runs very happily like this as a bare container. And another one is Apache CouchDB, which I need, where I want to do it in the way where you see the normal RC script. So porting an existing FreeBSD application into it. If we go back and look at the entry point, this is like your init script, really. And you can see here pretty same sort of stuff you'd have in an RC script. You make sure that there's a directory to hold the database files in with the right permissions, and then you run the command, pass it the config stuff, and it's good to go.
How's the uptake been with Podman? Is it super niche in certain industries, or is it getting attention across the board?
I think it's huge. So the provenance of all of this is Docker was doing their stuff, moving very fast, and from my perspective, the big companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, and so forth said, we like this container stuff, but we don't want to be beholden to another company. Let's crush them. And so they took the sort of the Docker stack and then decomposed it into various pieces that were then standardized. And there was a runtime, which is the piece that Doug's developed specifically, OCI jail for FreeBSD. There's the Podman suite with OCI containers, which is the work we did this year in release engineering to produce native FreeBSD images using package base. And then finally, there's the sort of orchestration layer, the Podman tools to pull all these containers in, assemble a network, which is another FreeBSD specific piece that Doug wrote, and then sort of build it all together. The first time you go through this and you see how simple it makes to set up a development environment for someone who is familiar with Linux but has never used FreeBSD, you realize this is something pretty significant. It really dramatically reduces the level of FreeBSD-ness to be able to deploy FreeBSD production and have tooling that's not dissimilar to what people are using elsewhere. Yeah, so the last
FreeBSD-ness, I like that. Go ahead.
I've just got to find it. Yeah, so there's another thing here, another VM tool for macOS for Linux machines, and from reading what Baptiste was saying, my understanding is this probably works with FreeBSD now as well. This is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. Something really easy to set up a VM, throw the Podman compose stuff into it, and then people should be up and running in a matter of minutes with their macOS plus FreeBSD jail systems. And then when we deploy the stuff to production, it's really close. But I haven't tried this. School holidays and the Mac is used by the kids for playing games. It's not mine anymore.
You said you had too many computers anyway.
Yeah, that's because they keep breaking. Now I'm going to need more computers. Yeah. Well, that was fast. Thank you, whoever cut and pasted that. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, that's enough for me.
That's a nice short URL. So Lima VM sounds like the main name there is now wrong. If you can bring up maybe FreeBSD under Lima.
Yeah, it should be FEMA. Yeah.
FEMA?
Well,
take it.
FEMA.
Oh boy. So you personally have been able to jettison a bunch of Ansible and Chef for this. You gain some, I guess, easy shareability with colleagues and the wilds of the internet. I guess who's owning that messaging in FreeBSD, because this does sound pretty significant, and come 15 should be, I trust, quite ready.
That's my plan, is that for 15 we can really go, here's how you put all these things together. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. While Jamie is still here, I have something I would love to get into 15.0. If possible.
Oh, do tell. I hope he's listening.
I am now.
You got your attention. Okay, let me.
I have a 80% done executable jail.conf patch. I have a slightly improved version of that.
That is.
And exactly, I still want to get that kind of past you. Because it's really helpful so that you can have a command which becomes the value in your jail configuration. So I can run arbitrary code, of course, by design in all the exec hooks, but that does not get the values I read out of a file, a database, whatever. It does not get them into the jail.conf. And if I have to template it out ahead of time, it's no longer dynamic. It's basically stale by definition. And I can no longer use the jail command without having stale dependencies with jail-c to just start, or jail-r to stop jails. Of course, you can slow down your system by being stupid, but you can already do that by having, I don't know, a Bitcoin miner in your exec.prepare hook.
Wait, is that composable?
Yes, it would be. For example, you can do stuff like on first time launching that jail, allocated a stable devfs rule set number so that I have a unique rule set number for that jail, so that jail can have its own rule set loaded, which would be also auto-generated. But for us all to be remotely sane and for the jail command to be able to mount the device file system with the right rule set number, that has to go into the jail.conf. So this kind of dependency injection is really elegant, in my opinion. And it's not like we don't have precedents for that. In base, for example, if you have the AutoFS auto mounter, you can have a dynamic AutoFS mount file, and if it's executable, you run it as a child process, you consume its standard output, and pass it as if it was a configuration file. And the patch is really tiny. The only thing I changed in my improved version, I haven't updated the review for, is to export a bunch of useful paths as environment variables so that you don't have to deduce the jail name and the base name of the file and so on. So that the scripts can be a bit simpler and shorter, and you don't have to do the same 3 lines at the beginning of every shell script you run there.
Is AutoFS the only other thing that does this? It just seems so out
Ansible
there.
does it too.
What
It's
else?
not
Sorry.
the base, of course. Ansible does it for the inventory, and a bunch of other things do it. I think Nomad does it in console. It's not that uncommon. It's not the most usual way to do it, but the other way would be to have some kind of plugin mechanism, which is even harder to use and even more code to add. Why not make the jail.conf the exchange format? Because there's just a bunch of things you cannot abstract over with .include alone. And again, it's not an increased attack surface because the existing jail.conf you could include can already run an arbitrary shell script as root through the hooks anytime you start the jail. If you go down a little and zoom out maybe so that we can actually read something.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not worried about the security thing because of that.
Yeah, because so yeah, jail.conf by and it's not like anyone would be expected to have an accidentally executable config file in /etc.
Oh, that I wonder about. I see trash executable bits
Yeah, okay.
keep showing
Someone
up.
does it change recursive change mod 777 their own worst enemy, and this is not the first thing exploding in their face. Because one of the things we can now do with this is, for example, have a little helper to read a UCL config file or an SQLite database and convert it to jail.conf without having to teach the jail command anything. You just write a little helper, or you query an LDAP database or a MySQL database.
Jan, you use the phrase 80% ready, and I see perhaps July 1st, 5:23 a.m. updates.
It's totally usable as is. It's just that there's a little like 10 more lines of code as a quality of life feature, which should go in, but if Jamie says that he's going to veto the idea anyways, I don't have to bother. And instead I would have to, I don't know, find a way to build the jail command as a port. And then submit this port.
No pressure, no pressure.
Yeah.
So
That's
back
why I
to
want
80% ready. So is it chicken and egg? It's not ready because it might get vetoed and it's not.
it's
Ba, ba, ba.
yeah, I polished it off like several months ago
Hmm.
and never bothered because it was kind of just tinkering with it and there was plenty of time for 15 and now the clock is ticking.
I guess Jamie here or later think about your top concerns and
Yeah.
let's determine if they're addressable.
I
Yeah.
mean, one way to make it so that you have to opt in would be to require you to give a flag to the jail command so that you have to, on the command name, enable this feature. We're slowly running out of letters. It cannot be done through the configuration file, not really, because it's a chicken and egg problem. Because it has to happen before the whole configuration is read. So,
Mhm.
but a command line flag to enable this feature would kind of act as a chicken bit if someone really has messed up permission on their jail configuration files. That would be easy to add as a safety feature, but yeah. Or
Yeah, might want to do
as
that.
it's really, if you look at the diff, it's really non-invasive thing to do.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, the only
with
concern I have
Jamie
besides
go.
this just isn't done is to make sure that we don't break existing things, including existing mistaken things like the expit on an actual configuration file.
yeah, okay. So then my proposed safety mechanism is to at least for 15 have a command line flag. You have to give the jail command so that it will do this. Otherwise, it will emit a warning and continue as before.
Yeah, could do it that way. Could have a fallback if it fails to execute based on bad file format, then it will try to read it again. Of course, by then you've
That would
forked.
no, I wouldn't do that because then if you have a corrupted executable, suddenly it tries to, let's say you have a partially copied shell script, you made a copy and paste error or something, and now it would try to slurp that into the jail.conf and obscure it. If this mechanism is there and it fails to exec, it should be a fatal error because it's a misconfiguration.
Okay.
Don't make it try to, oh, your executable isn't executable. Let's see if it works as a config file. That's not a polar compliant behavior, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I see that.
The patch already, if the process dies with any code other than 0, it's treated as equivalent to a syntax error. So that if you kill it at a line boundary, it does not consume a half configured jail configuration or something. So if the process dies for any reason, the configuration is treated as invalid. Because you
Okay.
don't want to have a partial jail configuration. That could be a really nasty surprise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will just try my luck with a safety flag. Any wish which of the remaining letters I should hijack for
Oh,
that?
right. There's a challenge 25
Yeah,
years
that's
on.
the always the flag thing. Yeah.
Oh, dash J, capital J for Jan. Is that a thing? No. I
Nah.
know. Ouch. They say the hardest part is naming things. Right? What flag?
I mean, there is a dash X available, so
Ooh,
Well, that would make sense.
not bad. Wow.
I was thinking about maybe uppercase F for the configuration file, but yeah, just adding a -x file. Okay, flag. Yeah, we'll try that.
So maybe communicate through that review, which is linked here, just so it's
Sure.
documented when we all act like adults and do our homework.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you both for uh, chicken and egging that, if
Um,
that's a verb.
Sure it is.
Okay, thank you.
bootstrapping. Um,
Oh, bootstrapping.
and I don't know if any one of you knows Colin Percival's neat little config init hack.
You mentioned that. Let me bring it up here. So yes,
Yep.
and it's independent of all the things from all the big names, as I recall.
Yeah, it's a 50 or 60 line shell script. If you click
Okay.
on that,
Yeah. Hopefully it's shared,
um,
maybe. Oh, did the share go away?
no, but
You are
I
sharing a screen.
switched
Okay.
to another
Aha.
full screen application.
Okay.
So the problem is that all of these bootstrap kind of things which solve the same problem like the container files
Mm.
where you run commands and so on. The most common things you have to do is kind of write a file so that you completely replace it, append to a file, or just run some commands. And now you're in the comments, but if you go up
I
again,
know. Yeah, yeah. I'm just wondering.
so the three things you can have is basically replace a file, append to a file, run a command, or an other tarball. And it's composable. So you can have tarballs of tarballs, but in the end you have a single file. You can just apply, and it will recursively go through the files in the order there in the tar archive.
Oh, that this
Or
guy.
no,
Yeah.
I think in lexical order because it unpacks the archive.
I see
But
4 points. Hmm.
Hmm?
I see 4 points, not three.
Yeah, the fourth is a nested tar.
Okay.
It's
You
tar
say
and
you
tar and
rewrote
tar.
it. Is that out in the open yet?
Not
You
yet.
didn't. Okay.
I will do that probably later today.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, and because it's now written in C, it's not just faster, which isn't really relevant, but it can change root and jail attach itself and take the tar stream with it. So you can use it on an empty jail or something.
Cool. Keep us posted. Share that link. Um, and for the sake of completeness, Creighton, do you have anything to share? Hoping I pronounced that correctly. You're muted and possibly you're on autopilot and making dinner or something. And in the meantime, you brought up this little chroot escape. Is that on any implementation of chroot or specifically FreeBSD or what, Jan?
Mostly it's discussed in the context of Linux, but I see no reason why it shouldn't apply to FreeBSD.
Hmm.
So the problem here is that sudo is a setuid executable as normally installed to do its job. And that means it can always change root because at the time when it changes root itself, it's still a root process. So of course it's privileged enough to do a change root, but then it's inside this untrustworthy new root environment. There are system configuration files like an SS switch, which defines which shared libraries to load into the current process to do name resolution stuff.
Hmm.
A harmless example for this would be, for example, the NSS underscore MDNS module, which allows you to ask Avahi for zeroconf devices so that you can ping hostname.local in your local network with multicast DNS. But if you have a malicious NSS module, inside the change root, now the sudo process will DL open a malicious shared library and run its initialization code, which means you get code execution in sudo before it drops privileges, which
Interesting.
is kind of game over because you don't even have to be allowed to run the command apparently. So even if you're not allowed to use sudo normally, you can still exploit it because the parts, yeah, it's a bug in a trusted set UID binary. So yeah, it's game over if it applies to you.
OpenWall, what's that based on? Haven't heard that name in a while. Off topic.
Yep.
So it sounds like Creighton, at some point you wanted to, if I pronounce that correctly, you want to talk about tracing, but maybe not today. Well, now, other topics, points, you name it. I would love to hear the Venn diagram of what is covered in EuroBSDCon proper and what we may want to deep dive in at BeehiveCon, because with 15 coming up and all this progress on OCI containers, that might be a good opportunity to just clearly spell out almost as a tutorial Podman plus OCI containers on FreeBSD 15 and the hopeful nexus of Jan, your fast jail start that
But
config
that's
it.
not Beehive related.
It's always been container
That's
related.
not a virtual machine workload. It's an OS level virtualization. So
Every
it's
VM should be contained. No, so it's all good. Whatever is covered in these calls is fair game for my own dark net.
okay.
So, uh, uh, yeah, house rules. I'll figure something out. I should reach out to Roger, who's been, I guess, still active on Zen, but relatively quiet. He's certainly made his mark on previous Beehive cons. So, other topics, ideas, questions, concerns, good news? If not, that was a great chat. Thank you for that demo, Dave. I know that you gaining muscle memory on that is good for all things and all people involved. And if you were spelling out many of the issues years ago at in Coimbra, well, it's clear that this is still front on your mind and you're trying to get it to where you want it to be. Well, if that's it, thank you. Does someone want the honors? I see only one is unmuted. Dave, you have the honors. Hopefully you know what that means.
I'm going to disappear off. I got kids to jail.
To jail, yes. Jail the kids. What he means is like and subscribe. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you tomorrow on the BFS call. Bye. Cheers. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Ooh, and I had my first club mate ever
Very good.
on the call. It's carbonated. Surprise, surprise. See ya.
It's my challenge for next week or the week after is
The Chaos Computer Club Berlin has a vending machine where you can get it.
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Intravenous.
Yeah, by the crate.
No intervene. The pH value is wrong. Don't do that.
Ew, okay.
At Chaos Computer Club events, I've seen stupid things happen, like the EMTs giving themselves a saline ethanol injection because they didn't get to start the party early, so they had to catch up. Injected themselves a saline solution with ethanol.
Goodness.
Intravenously, just as a joke. That started a lengthy discussion about what qualifies or disqualifies someone for being on the volunteer EMT stuff.
Putting chaos in CCC.
Yeah. We're no longer recording, right?
No, actually we are,
Yeah.
because I think that was the best part of it. Although, yes, the presentation was great, but come on. I could
Okay.
stop the share and show my proud world market purchase of Club Mate, which I got 4 of. Anyway,
All right.
cool. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for those
Cheerio.
insights.
Thanks, everyone.